The hotel lobby was chaos. Translators failing, the manager shouting, a powerful guest standing in silence as tension boiled. For nearly an hour, no one could break through. But then, from the shadows, someone the world had ignored stepped forward. In seconds, everything changed: status, power, respect, all flipped upside down. What secret did this overlooked worker reveal that shattered arrogance and exposed prejudice for all to see? For years, Maya Johnson had lived in the shadows of the Grand Regency Hotel. At 33, she was no stranger to the rhythm of invisibility, polishing marble floors, clearing champagne glasses, erasing the traces of luxury that others left behind. Guests passed her as if she were part of the furniture, a background detail in their world of power and privilege. And Maya had learned to accept it, or at least appear as though she did. Behind that quiet smile, however, was a story no one cared to ask about. Long before she put on the cleaning uniform, Maya had been a student of languages, volunteering at community centers, helping immigrants navigate a country that often refused to listen. She had studied late into the night, mastering words and cultures, but life's hardships had forced her into work far below her potential. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity, even as managers barked orders and wealthy guests overlooked her existence. To most, she was invisible. But to Maya, every passing moment was a lesson, a reminder of how arrogance could blind people to the humanity standing right in front of them. What she didn't know was that one ordinary day at work, her silence would shatter, and the entire hotel would discover who she truly was. The day began like any other. Maya moved silently across the glossy lobby floor, her mop gliding over Italian marble that reflected chandeliers like golden rivers. The Grand Regency was alive with its usual display of wealth: guests in designer suits, luggage carts stacked with leather bags, managers strutting as if the building itself belonged to them. Maya was there, as always, in the background. Unseen. Unheard. Forgotten. But that afternoon, something unusual disrupted the rhythm. A woman stood at the reception desk, poised, dignified, yet visibly frustrated. She wore an impeccably tailored suit and carried herself with the authority of someone who had built empires. Her presence drew stares, whispers, and restless glances among the staff. This was no ordinary guest. She was someone powerful. And yet, in that lavish lobby, she was being treated like an inconvenience. 3 translators hovered desperately, fumbling through attempts in Mandarin, Korean, Thai, none of which worked. The guest's expression remained unreadable, her silence heavy with growing impatience. Behind the counter, the manager's tone turned sharp, her voice echoing against the marble columns. "This is unacceptable," she barked, the words dripping with condescension. Guests turned to watch, some amused, some uncomfortable, but none daring to intervene. Maya paused mid-swipe, her eyes catching the scene. She understood more than most realized. It wasn't just about language, it was about power, about the way privilege demanded obedience. The woman at the desk wasn't failing to communicate. She was being dismissed, belittled, treated as though her value depended on speaking the right tongue. The manager's voice grew louder. "If she can't explain herself, she doesn't belong in this establishment." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The translators exchanged helpless looks, embarrassed at their failure. The air thickened with tension, as if the whole hotel were holding its breath. Maya's chest tightened. She had heard those words before, directed at others, and sometimes at herself. "Doesn't belong." It was the same dagger she had watched pierce countless colleagues, immigrants, workers, anyone who didn't fit the mold of what power thought acceptable. The sting of those moments still burned inside her. And yet she stayed frozen, mop in hand, her heart pounding. She knew her secret. She knew she could end this charade with a few words, spoken in the very language everyone claimed was impossible. But to step forward meant breaking the unspoken rule of her existence: stay invisible, stay silent, survive. Meanwhile, the guest's assistant tapped frantically on his phone, no doubt canceling meetings worth millions. Every tick of the clock tightened the noose around the hotel's reputation. But the manager didn't care. She leaned closer to the guest, voice cutting like glass. "You're wasting our time." The woman's eyes narrowed. Her jaw tightened. Though she remained silent, her clenched fists betrayed her anger. And Maya saw it, the insult, the indignation. Not just at the lack of translation, but at the way her humanity was being stripped away in front of dozens of strangers. Maya gripped the handle of her mop until her knuckles whitened. Memories flooded back, the Latina co-worker she once defended and lost her job for. The nights she spent translating documents for families abandoned by the system. The years of knowledge she had buried to survive in a job that treated her like she was disposable. The weight of it all pressed on her chest until breathing felt impossible. She knew, if she stayed silent now, she'd never forgive herself. Still, fear whispered. Fear of punishment, of losing the only paycheck she had. Fear of drawing the manager's wrath. Fear of what would happen when people realized the invisible maid was not what they thought she was. Across the lobby, the woman at the desk shifted, preparing to walk away. Her assistant was already gathering documents, clearly done with the humiliation. If she left, the hotel's future would shatter, and the arrogance that caused it would go unchecked. The manager straightened her suit, smirking as if victory was hers. She had won, she believed. She had broken another guest down with her arrogance. And that was the moment Maya felt something ignite deep within her. Her mop slid to the side, forgotten. She stood straighter, her eyes locked on the woman who had been dismissed, disrespected, nearly driven away. Her heart pounded, but her steps were steady. Each one echoed across the marble like a drumbeat of defiance. Gasps rose from the crowd as the quiet cleaning lady, the one they had ignored for years, walked toward the center of the storm. The manager spun around, eyes flashing with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" But Maya didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the guests, bowed her head slightly, and opened her mouth. The words flowed out, fluid, flawless, carrying not just meaning but respect. The very language everyone claimed was impossible, spoken with elegance they couldn't dream of. The lobby fell silent. The managers froze. The translators dropped their pens. And the woman at the desk, her eyes widened, her mask of stone shattering into something the world had not seen all day, relief. Maya had crossed the line. There was no going back now. The silence that followed Maya's words was deafening. For the first time all day, the powerful guest's eyes softened. Relief flickered across her face, quickly followed by something else, respect. But before the moment could settle, the manager's voice cut through the air like a blade. "What is going on here?" Her tone cracked with disbelief. "A maid? Speaking that language?" "No. Absolutely not." The crowd stirred. Some guests leaned forward in fascination, others recoiled, uncomfortable with the disruption of the script they had expected. The translators looked down in shame, realizing the truth. The one person they had ignored was the only one capable of solving the crisis. But the manager wasn't about to surrender her authority. She stepped closer, towering over Maya as if proximity alone could put her back in place. "You're out of line," she hissed, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "You have no right to involve yourself. This is not your place." Maya's heart raced, but she did not back down. For years she had been invisible. For years she had silenced her own brilliance to survive. But now, standing face to face with power, she realized her silence had never protected her. It had only allowed arrogance to grow unchecked. The guest's assistant whispered urgently, his voice trembling as he repeated Maya's words to his boss, confirming their meaning. The woman's stern mask cracked further, and her gaze fixed on Maya with curiosity and awe. But the manager only grew louder. "This hotel is not a charity. If guests want service here, they must adapt to us. Not the other way around." Her words dripped with disdain, her hands slicing through the air as if erasing the very idea of respect. Maya flinched at the venom. Every syllable carried the weight of centuries of dismissal, voices silenced, cultures erased, humanity reduced to convenience. The crowd shifted, restless now, their whispers rising like static. Phones were lifted, cameras recording. The injustice was no longer hidden in hushed corners. It was on display for the world. Still, Maya stood her ground. The manager's face twisted with rage. You think because you know a few foreign words, you're suddenly above your station? You're nothing but a cleaner. Do you hear me? Nothing. The words landed heavy, meant to humiliate, to reduce her to dust. But instead they ignited something deeper inside Maya, a fire built over years of being overlooked, underestimated, and disrespected. She raised her chin, her voice calm but unshakable as she addressed the guest again in flawless Japanese. The woman's eyes lit with understanding, and for the first time in hours she smiled. Not the polite smile of diplomacy, but one of genuine gratitude. The manager froze. The sight of her, invisible, employee being recognized by a guest of such power was unbearable. Her voice cracked into desperation. Security! She barked. Remove her. Now! 2 guards hesitated at the edge of the crowd, uncertainty etched across their faces. The cameras pointed at them, recording every second. To act now would mean choosing a side, between dignity and discrimination. The tension was unbearable. And then it happened. The guest, silent until now, finally spoke. Not in Japanese, but in perfect English. Her words sliced through the air, each one deliberate, each one aimed like an arrow. The only person creating a problem here is you. The lobby gasped. The manager stumbled back, her authority collapsing like glass shattering on stone. For hours she had mocked, belittled, and dismissed the guest under the assumption she could not understand. But she had understood every word, every insult, every ounce of prejudice laid bare for the crowd to see. The manager's face strained of color. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. She was no longer in control. Her performance had unraveled, her arrogance recorded and witnessed by dozens of eyes, and countless phones. And in that instant, Maya realized this was bigger than her. Bigger than the guest. Bigger than one confrontation in a hotel lobby. This was a mirror, forcing everyone to see the truth they had tried to ignore. That arrogance could blind. That prejudice could destroy. That invisibility was never the fault of the unseen, but the choice of those who refused to look. The guest turned back to Maya, her voice softer now, her respect undeniable. Thank you, she said simply. And in that thank you, the power in the room shifted. The manager's empire of control crumbled in real time. Her words no longer carried authority. Her title no longer shielded her. The world was watching, and the truth could not be silenced. Maya had done what no one else dared to do, she had stepped out of the shadows. And in doing so, she had turned the balance of power upside down. But as the cameras continued to roll, one question remained, heavy in the air, hanging over every person in that lobby. What would happen now that the mask of prejudice had been ripped away, and the world had seen the truth for itself? The lobby that once buzzed with luxury now felt like a courtroom, every eye fixed on the collapse of arrogance, and the rise of a truth too powerful to ignore. The manager stood pale and trembling, her words stolen, her authority stripped bare. For years she had spoken as though her power was unquestionable. But now, her prejudice was not just exposed, it was immortalized in recordings that would ripple far beyond the walls of that hotel. Maya, still in her simple uniform, felt the weight of dozens of stares pressing on her. Yet, for the first time, she did not shrink from them. She had stepped into the light, and the world was finally forced to see her, not as a cleaner, not as a servant, but as a woman of dignity, intelligence, and unshakable strength. The guest, calm yet resolute, made her presence known once more. She introduced herself fully, not just a traveler, but a businesswoman whose influence stretched across continents, whose voice carried the weight of millions of dollars in contracts. And then, with deliberate clarity, she declared that the only reason she had endured the humiliating scene for so long was to reveal what so many already suspected, that prejudice hides in plain sight, thriving in places that claim to be professional, polished, world-class. The impact was immediate. Phones buzzed as footage spread. By the end of the night, the incident would become a trending story across the city, and beyond. For the Grand Regency, what had once been a symbol of wealth and power now stood as a monument of arrogance brought to its knees. But the true transformation wasn't in the scandal, it was in Maya. For years, she had folded her brilliance into silence, convinced that invisibility was survival. But that day proved something different. Silence does not protect you from injustice. It only shields the injustice from being seen. By speaking, by refusing to remain hidden, she not only defended the dignity of a guest but also reclaimed her own. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The manager was dismissed, her name synonymous with disgrace. Diversity and inclusion programs, words once treated like corporate slogans, were suddenly implemented with urgency, fueled by fear of further exposure. And at the center of it all, Maya was offered an opportunity she never thought possible, a position that valued her skills, her knowledge, her lived experience. She was no longer cleaning the floors of the hotel, she was helping shape its future. Yet even as her own life transformed, Maya knew the story was bigger than her. Because for every moment like hers that went viral, there were countless others unseen. Countless workers dismissed because of their accent. Countless guests belittled for their culture. Countless people forced into invisibility simply because of the color of their skin. This story wasn't an isolated event. It was a reflection of a larger truth, that racism doesn't always wear a hood or shout in the streets. Sometimes it wears a tailored suit, smiles at wealthy guests, and hides behind corporate logos. Sometimes it thrives not in violence, but in the quiet, everyday dismissals that strip people of their dignity. But Maya's story proves something else, too. That courage, even from someone deemed invisible, can change everything. That when one person refuses to accept humiliation, the ripple can shake institutions to their core. Ripple can shake institutions to their core. 6 months later, Maya sat at a desk she never imagined would be hers, leading cultural programs that reshaped not just the hotel, but partner businesses across the country. Her work was building bridges where walls had once been, giving a voice to those who had been silenced for too long. And yet, she never forgot the moment it all began, the moment she chose to step forward when silence was safer. Because in that choice lay the lesson: change does not come when we wait for the powerful to act. It comes when those deemed powerless refuse to be invisible any longer. So the question remains, how many more Mayas will it take? How many more humiliations? How many more recordings? How many more lives dismissed before society finally learns to see the humanity in everyone? And if the world keeps looking away, who will be the next person forced to step out of the shadows and remind us all what dignity truly means?